You are listening to the Atlanta Sports Podcast, the only podcast covering all of your teams. Bringing you the best sports news from the state of Georgia, from the professional ranks to the high school levels, we have it all. Welcome back to the Atlanta Sports Podcasts. My name is Frankie Maloof, and in a little bit we're going to be joined by both Luke Winstel and Dave Neal over the phone. Dave is the play-by-play commentator for SEC Network and ESPN. We're going to talk about the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets in basketball today. You know, one of the things we talked about in this interview, we talked about a lot, was Georgia Tech had a new head coach, Josh Pastner. They hired him before the season started. He's done a respectable job this season, but obviously most Tech fans want to get back to the prominence that the program has once seen. It wasn't too long ago, so we talked about that. Recruiting is going to be a big topic today. We talk about that as well, what could be done for both Georgia and Georgia Tech to keep all the top talent inside the state of Georgia. We also talked about Tech's postseason outlook right now. They're not completely out of the NCAA tournament conversation. They're 11-8, so it's going to be tough for them to come back from that. But we talk about possibly the NIT, which would be a huge improvement for this program, something to build off of. And Dave thinks that would be a great spot for them to start to potentially build their program back to national prominence in the next few years under their new coach, Josh Pastner, who he had some pretty good things to say about. His energy, he really enjoyed that. And before we get into that interview, I want to thank you for finding us, whether it be on iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher Radio. We also have a YouTube channel, so thank you for finding us there, and I encourage you to subscribe there as well. That would mean a lot to us. And also tell your friends, if you know anybody that likes Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, or any team in the state of Georgia for that matter, tell them about us. We'd love to have them. And then also one more thing before we move on to the interview, we're going to go over Tech's upcoming schedule. Today they play Florida State. They play them tonight in Atlanta. Florida State's number 5 in the RPI rankings. That'll be a tough game. Florida State's having a great season. Then on Saturday they play Notre Dame, again in Atlanta. Notre Dame's also having a pretty good season. They are 15th in the RPI rankings. Their record is 17-3. And then they also play Wake Forest next week. Wake is 12-7. They have a number 21 RPI, mainly due to that strength of schedule. The ACC is stacked from top to bottom. You know, there are times that Tech is very inconsistent, but then they did beat North Carolina, then turned around and lost to Duke. So this Tech has shown flashes of promise. I don't think they're there yet, but they're definitely on their way. I think they made a good choice in Coach Pastner, and I'm encouraged to see where they could possibly go. And now here's Dave. Now we are very happy to be joined by Dave Neal, the SEC Network and ESPN commentator for both football and basketball. Dave, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Glad you guys could have me on tonight. This is fantastic.
First off, what do you like most about new head coach Josh Pastner?
Great energy. He is a guy that brings a lot of passion. He's a guy that has certainly been under a pressure situation at Memphis. He was expected to win every night at Memphis. He's a guy that knows what it's like to be in big environments. I hope that he understands what it's like to be in the ACC, though. I mean, it's a different deal when you're coaching at Memphis versus Georgia Tech, North Carolina, and NC State, Duke, and the rest. So we'll see how that works out. But I think he's done a marvelous job with a roster that is certainly not ACC caliber yet, and the fact that they've already won 3 games is remarkable. And late start on recruiting, and yet there's a pretty good vibe down the flats right now about what he's been able to do so far. So let's see if it can continue. I know there's 5-6 weeks left of basketball, and see how far he can take this team.
Coach Pastner has these Yellow Jackets really confusing a lot of folks. They're playing really well one day and then not so well another. So what do you think the formula would be for them to become a more consistent team?
Well, I think that's hard to pinpoint, with this group. I don't know that there is a consistent player. His best players are big man Ben Lammers, who's just had a remarkable transformation from last year to this year. And, he got shut down against Virginia over the weekend. And I don't know that there is that one go-to guy on this team. So they have to be really creative in terms of how they score the basketball. They'll have a couple of nights to where, as you just talked about, where they can put the ball in the basket, but they have to be really good defensively because there's not going to be a lot of nights where they can outscore the opposition. And putting up 49 points against Virginia, who has been really good defensively over the last few years, but that's not going to win you many games. When Georgia Tech scores 70 points, I think they're undefeated this year, if I'm not mistaken. So, that's kind of their number they have to shoot for, but it's going to be tough for them to get to that number. So, in terms of how they have to win games and be consistent, I think it has to start on the defensive end because I don't know that they have a consistent score offensively. And if they can shut down opponents and keep them in the 50s, I think they have a shot to win every night. And that's hard to do in the ACC. But if they can do that, I like their chances.
Tech is 11-7, but definitely they still have a shot at the tournament, especially with their strength of schedule, although it's going to be tough in the ACC. What exactly do they need to do to get a berth in the tourney?
Well, you just hit it. They got, first of all, their road wins are, in terms of an RPI, are huge. They jump up. You can move up 10, 15 spots in a night with a good road win, and you have to defend the home. If you lose at home, your RPI gets shot. I think Georgia Tech's RPI just snuck into the top 100. I don't think any team has ever taken an at-large bid outside of the top 40. So Georgia Tech's got a long road. They're going to have to upset some folks. They have Florida State coming up. That would be a huge win. Upset a team in the top 10 like Florida State, who has just been on a roll lately. You got to pull off some of those monumental type upsets. I think, listen, if Georgia Tech can play postseason basketball, going to the NIT, to me, would be just a huge accomplishment for Georgia Tech this year. I don't think anybody expected much out of this group, and they've already had some huge wins. Beating North Carolina was just shocking to me, and it shocked a lot of people around the country as well. And the fact that, I know they lost to Virginia, but the fact that they were actually 3-3 before this weekend in ACC for the first time since, I think, 2010, was remarkable in itself. So, I think if Georgia Tech sets their sights on an NIT berth as opposed to an NCAA berth, I think that they would be better served because it's a long road in the ACC, and I think that might be a little bit out of their reach. So let's go NIT before we start thinking NCAA just with this particular team.
Is there a single part of this Georgia Tech team or a single player that you think is going to make a bigger impact going forward than he did earlier this season, or maybe someone that may break out down the stretch here as the season starts heading towards postseason play?
Well, as I hit on earlier, I think the guy that's just totally impressed me this year is Ben Lammers. A guy last year that was kind of a role player has improved his scoring by like 11 points per game. He dominated Clemson a week or so ago when Georgia Tech beat Clemson at Alexander Memorial Coliseum. Now, he was, pretty much put on the shelf against Virginia, but then again, pretty much everybody was. It's 49 points. But he's a guy that if you can keep feeding him, and if he can give you 15 points, 8, 9 rebounds a game, I think you got something with this young man. I mean, he has really made a difference in a league where if you have post presence and you have somebody that can provide you some rebounds and can attack the offensive glass on a nightly basis, you're going to have a pretty good chance. He's got to stay on the floor, stay out of foul trouble, of course, but he has made a substantial difference in this team, and the job that Pastner and company have done with him, just kind of making him an offensive weapon, has been remarkable. So I'll keep my eye on him the rest of the season.
So like you were talking about a little bit earlier, the NIT might be the best goal for the Jackets this year, but looking ahead to the future, how will they be able to break into that top group in the ACC like they were in past seasons?
I think I think certainly it's a possibility. I think there's a little bit, if this team can get some postseason basketball, it sets you up for a nice little run. I think it gives Josh Pastner an opportunity to hit the recruiting trail in the off season and maybe sign a guy. And listen, basketball is completely different than football. it only takes one or two guys to make a difference on a team. Whether it's a JC route, which Georgia Tech doesn't really like to do a lot of. But if you can go find that one JC guy that can really score for you, or it's a post presence, a big body that can rebound for you, or even get that graduate transfer that has 1 year left that can be a difference maker, that can bridge it from, year 2 for Pastner to year 3, then I think maybe you have a chance to maybe do something. And if there can be a little bit of buzz, no pun intended here with Georgia Tech, but if there can be a little bit of buzz with this program, it shouldn't be too long. And basketball is just, it's set up for teams to, get there in a hurry. Now, I'm not saying that they can win an ACC championship, but I'm saying that they can certainly put themselves in a position to be an NCAA top team. And let's face it, the ACC is a league that can send 7 and 8 teams to the tournament every year. So, you don't have to be dominant. You just need to be in the top half. And I think Georgia Tech can get there sooner rather than later.
The recruiting realm is very rich in Georgia, yet it seems that most of the top talent prefers to go out of state, bypassing both the Georgia Bulldogs and the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. So what do you think is the reason for this, and what do you think can be done to fix this for both teams?
Well, I think Josh Pastner, is a guy at Georgia Tech that's going to try to figure out a way to make this work. Obviously, he was able to get some good talents in Memphis, and obviously they're not in a big power conference at Memphis, but he's able to land some really talented players. So we'll see if he's able to do that. Mark Fox has gone out and found some talent. You're right about a lot of the majority, the big name, the big product players. They want to go out and they want to go play for the Kentuckys, the Kansases, the North Carolinas, because that's where you go. I mean, that's just what the kids today, where they want to go play. And you got to find that kid that has some loyalty to that school, whether it be his parents went there, or he has some relationship with that his AAU coach or his high school coach has a relationship with Mark Fox or one of the assistant coaches at Georgia to kind of help facilitate that desire to go to the University of Georgia, and maybe start that trend. There's just not that much flavor when you go to these AAU events for these kids. You just don't see a whole lot of Georgia Bulldog basketball gear floating around the gyms. And that's part of the problem. There's not a lot of flash or fanfare. At Georgia Tech back in the 80s when Bobby Crimmins was coaching Georgia Tech, boy, it was a hot commodity. Well, it's not right now, and it hasn't been for a long time. And I'll be anxious to see if Josh Pastner can get these kids to wear the Georgia Tech hat around the gym. That's a big part of it. So I think, we'll see how it works for Georgia Tech, but you got to make it so these kids talk about it. You got to make them want to wear the T-shirts and the hats, and we're not there yet. And let's hope it happens, because I think the people in the state certainly deserve some good basketball.
Dave, you live in the Atlanta area, so before we let you go, we have to get a prediction for the Super Bowl. Falcons or Patriots?
As a long-time, lifelong Atlanta Falcon, and of course my dad broadcast the Atlanta Falcons on 2 separate occasions, covering about 15, 16 years. There is no way that I'm going to say that the Patriots are going to win this. My heart bleeds red and black, and I think it's a great Falcons team. They're so much fun to watch. I hope they have enough. And if Julio Jones is healthy, there's nobody in the world that can stop him. And I'll have my fingers crossed, my toes crossed, and I just hope that the Falcons can pull this out. In my lifetime, it would be nice to see the Atlanta Falcons win a Super Bowl, although they've broken my heart so many times. But I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that this is the year. So let's go with the Atlanta Falcons. I think it's their time.
All right, Dave, thank you again for joining us today. We really enjoyed it.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you for having me on.
And thank you again for listening to the Atlanta Sports Podcast. That brings us to the end of our show today. I want to thank you for finding us on iTunes and Google Play and Stitcher Radio or on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, make sure to subscribe to us in one or more of those categories wherever it may be most convenient to you. And tell your friends about us. If you do know a lot of people, or even just if it's just a few, let them know about us, and we'd love to have them. And we hope to have you come back and listen to us next week with another show.